like mine with jam on. I like curry with mine.
10 months ago we planted the seed. Here we are now, almost ready for harvest, but to get to here though we've had to have food, water and sunshine. The next process is the combine harvester will arrive. The combine's like a huge lawnmower, but it actually cuts enough grain every 10 seconds to produce 70 loaves of bread. And we will then take the crop from here into the barn. It'll be stored until the miller asks for it, who will then take it away, grind it into flour, and then hopefully it'll end up on your breakfast table as a nice loaf of fresh bread.
Well, the first thing that happens is the grain has to arrive, so it comes down from the field in a tractor, which has come from the combine just up the road, and it's tipped into a silo downstairs. The grain is then lifted up, and here we are on the grain storage part of our mill here at Shipton. Essentially the process is grain coming down a chute, going between two stones, the top one of which is spinning round, the bottom one is fixed. It falls through a hole in the middle of the top stone. The top stone is called a running stone because it's running round in circles. The hole is called the eye. The two stones are set very closely together. They grind the flour moves to the outside of the stone where we collect it in a hopper, and that's it. If you don't have the right flour, you can't make the right bread. So we make a special flour for making baguettes. We make a white flour for making pizza dough because it's really white, and that's what you want when your pizza's there. We make a lovely rich yellow creamy flour for making cakes, which is very low in protein. It's also very good for making sauces. It's what you might call a plain flour. You want strong flour for bread. You wouldn't necessarily notice much difference to look at it, but it would do different things for different products. Making flour is probably the second oldest form of food processing to brewing. They're very, very similar in process. So we've been here for 1,000 years. We're mentioned in the Doomsday Book. When William the Conqueror did his survey of the UK, Shipton Mill was actually mentioned. So we know what the miller was buying, what he was paying in rent, how much he was producing on this very site. I expect we'll be here for another 1,000 years as people are going back to what we used to do in the old days, because they're realising that actually you get a better quality of product, and also the whole price of moving things around the country is getting more expensive. So your local miller, your local baker, your local farmer supporting the local community is becoming really, really important. Once we've made the flour, it either goes into a big tanker, it goes into small bags which go off to the local shop, or it goes into large sacks which goes off to the local baker. And he will now show you how to make bread.
This is an ordinary white bread flour I'm using for this particular mix. We've got enough flour here to make about 10 loaves, 10 small loaves, and this is what we use for our main ingredient. We then have to add some salt, and then to make it rise up, we add some yeast. That will make the bread rise, and then to stick the whole thing together, we have to use water. So first of all, we'll add the dry ingredients together. So that's the salt going in, a little bit of salt, and then the yeast. And then we'll just mix all that up together. And now we need the water to make it all stick together. Now this is fine if you're only doing a few loaves, but we're doing thousands of loaves here every day, so we obviously need much bigger equipment and bigger containers to be able to mix it all together. The yeast makes the bread rise, so you get a much nicer product, a much lighter loaf, so it's much nicer to eat. If you didn't have yeast, it would just be very, very dense and solid. So we add a bit of yeast, a bit of baker's yeast, which is fresh, and we add that in just to make the bread rise up. This is the simplest way of making bread and the most popular way. It's very an old-fashioned way of making bread, what we're doing here. It's yeast, salt, water and flour, 4 ingredients, and it is the best way of doing it. We add no chemicals, nothing to make it last longer. So a lot of time is involved making bread, so this mixing process itself will take a long time, and then it has to stand and rest for a long time. Ever since we started, which was 25 years ago, we've been doing it like this, and we feel it's the best way of making bread. You get the nicest product, it tastes the best, it's got nice crust on it, it's just really enjoyable to eat. You can see it's beginning to stick together now. It's a bit of a crummy mess, but if we keep working at it, we will end up with a nice smooth dough, hopefully. Yeah. This is called kneading. We would normally use a big mixer to do this, so we don't really do it by hand generally, but this is the best way of doing for a small amount, is just doing it like this. And it's kneading, it's working the dough, it's bringing all the ingredients together, making a nice smooth dough that you're going to make a fantastic loaf out of in the end. When we added the water, it goes very sticky, but the more you work it, it begins to all bind together in its own unique way, and gradually you can feel it becoming smoother and smoother in your hands. And if we keep doing this for a good while yet, it'll turn into a really lovely smooth dough, which is what we end up with to get our fantastic loaves. Obviously we want to make our bread as safe as possible for everybody, so we're wearing a white coat and a hairnet while we're doing this work. And the reason for that is to keep the bread safe and make sure that nothing drops into it that shouldn't be there. So we know that every loaf that leaves our bakery is good to eat, and there's nothing in there that shouldn't be, so everyone's going to enjoy it. Yeah. So as it's coming together, it's beginning to smell much more bready, nice and yeasty, and I think it's not going to be long before it's ready to go in the oven and make us a fantastic loaf. So now we've mixed our dough up by hand, we now want to divide it up into portions, either 5 large loaves or 10 small ones, mould it up and then put it into our bread tins ready to prove and rise up in the tin. So we now mould them into a nice long shape ready to go into our bread tins. Now we've left the bread to rise for half an hour, we just need to decorate it and then get it into the oven. So we're going to leave the bread in this very hot oven now for about 25 to 30 minutes, ready to bake. Good enough to eat.